Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive, thousand-year-old intellectual trial that literally shaped the landscape of Indian philosophy. Imagine, if you will, stepping into an ancient arena. But we're not talking about swords and shields here. This is a battle of high-stakes logic, where the very nature of reality itself is being put on the stand.
This visually striking cover belongs to Gajendra Thakur's modern translation of a seminal 11th century Sanskrit text, the Atma Tattva Viveka. Originally composed by the brilliant logician Udayanacharya, this incredible work had basically been locked behind the forbidding, complex walls of classical Sanskrit. But what Thakur has done here is genuinely remarkable. He's managed to break that ancient wisdom out of its Sanskrit lockup and bring it right into the living, breathing, and highly accessible language of Maithili.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the thousand-year philosophical war. Second, the four pillars of refutation. Third, a drama of knowledge. Fourth, translating the untranslatable. And finally, a monumental Maithili milestone. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Thousand-Year Philosophical War, Udayanacharya versus Buddhist Philosophy. Let's set the stage by traveling back to the historic soil of Mithila, the exact site where this monumental debate reached an absolute fever pitch of logical density.
For centuries, Udayana's masterpiece was pretty much inaccessible to the general public. It was just too dense. But looking at its journey, starting all the way back in the 11th century, we finally see a massive breakthrough when Gajendra Thakur published the very first Maithili edition in 2004. And that immense effort culminated in this newly enlarged 2026 critical edition. So this isn't just your standard book release. It represents a profound cultural homecoming for the entire intellectual heritage of Mithila.
Moving on to Section 2, Four Pillars of Refutation, the Courtroom Face-Off. Now I want you to imagine we are walking right into an ancient, echoey hall of disputation, ready to evaluate the four massive pillars of Buddhist thought that Udayanacharya systematically puts under the microscope.
The very first major objection raised in our intellectual courtroom poses a truly fascinating question. Is the self merely momentary? The Buddhist doctrine of momentariness basically claims that whatever is real exists for only a single fleeting instant. Nothing lasts. So let's see exactly how Udayana handles this enormous claim.
Okay, so the Buddhist doctrine of no-self argues that the self is just this momentary stream of aggregates constantly flashing in and out of existence. Well, Udayana, representing the Nyaya Vaiseshika school, issues a hard, unequivocal no to that. He argues that the self is actually an eternal, enduring substance, and he proves it using our basic everyday experience of recognition. He points out, quite logically, that without a permanent, continuous self, our ability to remember something from yesterday, or to even be held morally responsible for our actions, would be completely and utterly impossible.
To push back even harder, Udayana goes after Apavavada, which is known as the theory of exclusion. This Buddhist doctrine claims that the meaning of a word is entirely based on the exclusion of everything else. Meaning, if you say the word cow, it doesn't refer to a positive real entity. It technically just means a non-cow. I know, it sounds incredibly abstract and a bit dizzying, right?
But Udayana totally dismantles this hyper-abstract theory using a super concrete everyday analogy. He points out that when someone wants to fetch water, they don't walk up to a pot thinking, this is not a non-pot. Obviously not. You act based on the positive, direct realization, this is a pot. He's basically saying human language and action have to connect directly with a positive reality. We don't just walk around navigating the world through double negatives.
Then, our intellectual trial shifts to the second major pillar, questioning the very fabric of reality itself. The big question here is the external world completely unreal? Is it merely just an illusion or a form assumed by our own consciousness?
The Yogacara philosophy insists that cognition and the object being cognized are identical. So to them, the external world is totally unreal and consciousness is the only thing that actually exists. Udayana steps in and firmly counters this subjective idealism. He argues that cognition is really just the illuminator, while the object is the thing being illuminated. To him, the external world is very real and entirely independent of our minds. It's like when you look at a color, you don't experience the feeling of, I am blue. You clearly experience that object over there is blue.
Section 3. A drama of knowledge. Literary tools of debate.
What makes this text such a masterpiece is that it isn't just some dry, dusty collection of logical proofs. It's actually designed as a highly engaging drama of knowledge.
Take the famous elephant at the gate analogy. Udayana uses this hilarious, highly visual metaphor to mock the Madhyamaka doctrine of emptiness. He compares their complex philosophy to a foolish man who walks up to a palace, sees a massive elephant standing right there at the gate, but somehow mistakes it for darkness, or maybe a cloud, or a shadow, before finally throwing his hands up and declaring it's absolutely nothing at all. It's a biting piece of satire that takes abstract logical flaws and makes them instantly obvious and funny to the reader. And it's so fascinating how he weaves these rich principles of Indian poetics into the logic. He brings in Shantarasa, this deep undercurrent of tranquility aimed at ultimate liberation, and places it right alongside Vira Rasa, which is the sheer intellectual heroism of rigorous debate. He uses Vakrokti, which are these oblique interrogative questions that literally force you to actively judge the argument yourself. Combine that with super grounded everyday analogies like a seed and a sprout, and he successfully guides the reader all the way from vigorous, heated intellectual conflict straight to a state of ultimate spiritual peace.
Section 4. Translating the untranslatable, bringing Sanskrit to Maithili. So how exactly did Gajendra Thakur manage to modernize this incredibly dense ancient courtroom drama for a 21st century audience without losing its philosophical soul?
Well, he achieved this by masterfully blending distinct Western translation theories. On one hand, he used Eugene Nida's concept of dynamic equivalence. This means he unfolded those tightly packed arguments into clear, conversational Maithili question-and-answer prose, trying to reproduce the exact intellectual aha moment of the original text. But he perfectly balanced that with Venuti's concepts of foreignization and domestication. He deliberately kept the highly precise, slightly intimidating foreign, Sanskrit technical terms, but he cleverly embedded them inside the comforting, deeply familiar rhythm of Maithili syntax.
You can really sum up this brilliant strategy in one phrase: foreign term, native sentence. This approach completely removes the agonizing linguistic barriers of ancient Sanskrit, but, and this is absolutely crucial, it leaves the formidable intellectual challenge completely intact for the modern reader. So you don't lose an ounce of the philosophical precision, but you gain total readability.
Section 5. A monumental Maithili milestone, achievements and feedback. While this 2026 translation is undoubtedly an epic-making achievement that proves Maithili is fully equipped for advanced philosophical prose, the reviewer does offer some really solid, constructive feedback for the next critical edition.
These are some rapid-fire recommendations, but they're important ones. Things like clearly identifying the exact Sanskrit-based text that was used, or typographically distinguishing the translator's helpful subheadings from Udayana's original words so the reader knows who is speaking. Adding a technical glossary for heavy-hitting terms like apoha would be huge. Throw in a detailed subject index, and make sure to separate the translator's personal praise from the objective historical introduction, and you instantly elevate this translation to the level of a top-tier, internationally reviewed study edition.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with Udayana's own profound metaphor, which demands true active competence from his readers. He wrote, "The crowning stone of the city of liberation, a painter's glory is not increased by the praise of the blind." What a powerful statement. It directly challenges us to not just blindly praise ancient wisdom, but to actively study, preserve, and truly understand the ideas that shaped our modern world. So the question is, are we prepared to open our eyes and critically engage with the philosophies that define our reality? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning.